Now, in our In Focus section, we're joined by Kyle Hunsberger from GoneMad Software to talk about the GoneMad Music Player.
I would like to welcome Kyle from the GoneMad Music. I have with me today Marion and
Hello.
Austin Pinto. Guys, meet Kyle.
Hi, Kyle.
Hi,
This is
Kyle.
Austin.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
Nice to
How you
meet
guys doing? Thanks for having me.
you.
Well, Kyle, we want to welcome you to Blind Android Users, and it's so exciting that you were able to join us today. We've been talking about this over the few past weeks, and that day finally is here. And so we have a few questions that we would like to ask you, but I think that Miriam, the young lady, has a burning question that she's been burning to ask you about.
Yeah.
And so, Miriam, you want to ask Kyle that question?
Yeah. So, okay, when I first actually saw the application on Play Store, I was just really curious about the name because, if you see a different name on Play Store, you just get kind of, okay, does that sound good or not? And sometimes for me, as a person who loves to try applications, like, okay, that sounds like a different thing. So how did you get the idea of this different name?
Yeah, I get that a lot. So it started off back in, back when you first trying to establish an online presence in like the 2000s and stuff. I had, trying to think of a name. I'm not very good at that. So I had been a big fan of kind of the new metal scene and stuff. And there was a band in Florida called GoneMad, and that kind of stuck. And then when, I started joining like the IRC chat and whatnot, you're forced to use a name. So I was like, let me just use that. And I kind of got known as GoneMad. And then when I would be playing a game, they need an alias. So I just used GoneMad. And then over time, I'm never good at coming up with names for my personal projects. I'd always name them GoneMad something. Like I wrote a media library that interacted with Winamp, and I was like GoneMad Media Library, GMML. And then when I got to the point of doing Android apps, a music player, I was just like, oh, I'll just name it after myself, because at that point I was GoneMad. You'll see me, when I'm typing out, it's usually GMMP or whatever. So it takes a long time to say, but and when typing it up, just 4 letters. And that's kind of how I got that name. Also, I was going to say, the coming up with app names, you always have to worry about the legal aspect of it. And like you said, GoneMad is it's kind of an odd name. So on my quick searches, there's no GoneMad anything. So when I created an LLC for my app, just for, the little protection I get there, I was like GoneMad Software and then GoneMad Music Player. And also it'll just, like you said, it's odd. So it's not like a standard name. So maybe catching people's interest.
Yeah, it does actually. So actually, was it your first, app that you put out on the Play Store, or you've actually developed anything else before it?
It was my first app. I'll go into how I kind of created this app. So my reasoning behind it, I had, I have a long history of doing software development, but I always wanted to get into Android development. And this was like 2011, around there. I didn't have an Android device yet. So I was looking online. I found this 5-inch Android tablet that was running Donut. So this is 1.6, and there was not much of a selection for Android apps at the time, especially music players. It was a 500 gig player, or tablet, and the default music player came with only supported 32,000 songs, which, if you have a programming background, you can understand where that limit comes from. A 16-bit integer can only hold 32,000 different numbers. So for whatever reason, they limited it to that. And 500 gigabytes, how that can be a lot more. So with that frustration, like I had so much more on there. I was like, let's, I wanted to get into Android development. So I'm like, I'm going to give myself a challenge. I looked on Google's documentation, saw the media player APIs. I'm like, this is not that hard. So I gave myself a challenge to, create a workable music player in a weekend. And if you go to my blog, there are probably 15 or so posts that I blogged throughout the weekend. I kind of closed off my schedule. I wasn't married at the time, so I didn't have to worry about dealing with the wife and kids. And by the end of, I started on Friday night. By the end of Sunday, I had a workable player with a, built-in, I called it a playlist at the time. It was a queue, a library, and I was able to play songs. And I kind of just continued from there because there was it was an Arcos device, and on the forums, a lot of people had similar complaints. So I started posting on there. Maybe like a few weeks later, when I had a little more workable version, and kind of, I honestly just forgot about that for a while, and this just kind of sparked up that memory. But that kind of got them. There's a few users really into it, so they kept on downloading, giving me feedback, and then it just kind of evolved into that music player, and that I put out on the Play Store probably a half year later. And now we have 3.0 that just came out about a month or two ago.
So, Kyle, I kind of go back to when I first came across GoneMad, and that was back in 2013. And of course, at the time, I had just gotten my Samsung Galaxy S4, and we were taking a trip as a family across across the country. We were going from the state of Washington to Ohio, and I used that player. But then the good thing about that player that really thrilled me was the crossfading feature that seemed to be the only one at the time that had it. And then also the fact that it was completely accessible with my TalkBack, the screen reader as a blind person TalkBack that I used. Now, tell us about how you came about making that accessible to blind people, and if this was such a difficult undertaking to make it accessible.
I'll be honest, it was a complete accident that it was as accessible as it was. Basically, when you're creating the UIs, you have a bunch of fields, you set the properties and stuff, and there was a field that was like content description, and the IDE I was using to develop, it's like, you should populate this. I was like, okay. And, not really knowing what it did, but it's easy. It's just, a small little description of whatever the UI element is, a UI element that a user would care about. Who cares if it's a background? You don't need to know what the name of the background is or anything. But yeah, I did that. And then the forum that I guess a lot of the blind users that I guess had contacted me, someone from there, and pointed me to that. And I found there's a whole community of users that were, really into this player. So being able to get feedback from them, because, me not being a blind user, I've used TalkBack before, and that alone is probably the biggest difficulty, is just trying to navigate with that on there. Yeah. Especially I get it on, I'm like, how do I get it off?
Yeah.
But yeah. So going through all that, and then, users reaching out, and, once I was made aware, I made that kind of the forefront of whenever I'm doing, same with translations as well. I want to make sure when I'm adding something new that I'm getting it as translated and as accessible as possible. The original, so let's say, we'll talk about it later, but like the GoneMad Classic, that UI was pretty straightforward, not as much dynamic stuff. So as long as I, defined we define the UIs in an XML file. As long as it's listed there, it's great. But in the newer 3.0, there's a lot more dynamic user interface stuff you can do. You can add custom buttons and actions to your now playing screen. And a lot of that stuff is just done on the fly. So I had to make sure that every single button, action, icon had a description that goes along with it. So that's kind of how all this happened. And, like I said, once I was made aware, I'm more than happy to do whatever I can to support you guys. I had a user reach out during the beta of 3.0 about one of the newer UI elements that happened to be a third-party library that I was using, and it wasn't working too well. So I was like, all right, let me look into it. There's only so much I can do because it's not my code. But fortunately, going on GitHub, saw that someone else had reported the bug, and I just had to update the library, and sure enough, it worked. The user was happy, and everyone's good.
That's
I
what
think it's
we
really
like.
great to consider accessibility when you're developing stuff, because I know a lot of developers just, either don't care, or people or blind people don't reach out to them and say like, hey, okay, this is not accessible, or there are some buttons that aren't labeled or anything. So I really, really do appreciate this, because it's something that every single developer actually needs to consider when he's developing something because, now we can, as blinds, download anything through Play Store and install stuff, and it's definitely, really important to do that.
I completely agree. And I've always gotten a lot of the feedback I've got from my users like, wow, you respond really fast and stuff. Like, I don't like seeing unread emails. So it's like, I always encourage my users to reach out. Don't, like, if you have something to say to me, don't do a comment on the, a review on the Play Store, because you can't really have a talk through a review that you just edit back and forth. Toss me an email, post in the forums. I have a Discord set up if someone wants to come in to chat on there. So I'm more than welcome to talk to users. And honestly, half of the features on there were requests from users. I used to be a little more picky with how I listen to my music, but nowadays I'm just throwing everything on shuffle, or I use the auto DJ, which is kind of a combination of the two. But yeah, I'm always looking for feedback. So yeah.
So Kyle, let's talk about, because you get two concurrent versions running on there on the Play Store. We have the classic and we have the regular 3.0. Now tell our listeners what the differences are between these two versions, and as to whether or not one should get either or which one, depending on the age of the device, which one to get.
Sure. So Classic is my original app that I developed back in 2011. Did wrote the player, continued on. It got to the point, Google introduced material design, so I kind of revamped the UI, but it's still all on this old code base that was developed in the gingerbread days. It got to the point that it was really hard to maintain, but so many people love that when I started 3.0, it was not necessarily from scratch, but in the end, I rewrote about 75-80% of it using all the newer libraries that Google has put out. Because back when I first started, if you wanted to do something that wasn't supported by the bare bones API, you had to write something custom. So 2.0 had a lot of custom stuff in there, like that old Hollow UI had a lot of custom code in there. And over time, that becomes really hard to maintain, especially after Google releases an update that breaks 3/4 of what you did. And it got to the point that it was just really hard to support. So that was the main incentive. And just, I wanted to do something new for 3.0. So if you have an older device and you like a UI that's based off of, a bunch of tabs going back and, everything in a single tab and nice, and I'm not going to say my 3.0 is not responsive, but it works the Classic works way better on older devices. I would still recommend trying 3.0, but there's always that option of going back to Classic. Originally, I always want to make, if you look on my website, I have not every single APK or whatever, but the older, like 1.0, 1.1, all those old versions available to download, just in case, because at some point I drop support for an older version of Android or something like that. So I always wanted to make it available. And when I came out with 3.0, I had the old one, Classic. It was 2.x on my site, but a lot of people just don't want to sideload. So I was fortunate that Google has put a lot of restrictions on some newer versions of Android, mainly file storage. And they were planning on enforcing this a few years ago, and they've delayed. So that gave me a little window that I was able to re-upload a new app that still followed all the old standards. I didn't have to comply with the new scope storage, if you've ever heard of that.
Of course.
So yeah, that's up there. I have about another half year until I will not be able to update it. So if there's critical issues, I'll still update Classic on that. But my focus is on 3.0, because that was about 4 years of development. I spent a lot of time on that, trying to follow all the guidelines and everything. And yeah, so and they're both, it's 14-day trial on both of them, so it's free to try. There's no reason why you can't try them both and see which one you like better.
Now, what's the price of, if one wants to be able to remove the ads and get all the functionalities of the app? I know I bought mine so long ago, Kyle, that I don't remember. Was it $2.99 or $3.99? I don't even remember.
The base price. Now, just want to say there's no ads. It's a trial. So after
no ad. Okay,
you get. Yeah, you can't use it after the 14 days.
Okay, so when
Yeah.
you install it, you have every access to the
Yes,
app
it's
for
the full
14
app.
days.
Yes,
I
14
see.
days. So the base price is $3.99 US. Recently, I did, after talking with a user from India, like I know I guess it's considered very expensive there, so I did lower it to 100 of rupees,
The
I guess.
Indian rupees.
Yes, Indian rupees, which I
Yeah,
think it brings it down closer to the $1.50
like a
range
dollar
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the base price, but I always try to do sales. There hasn't been any sales lately because I've been mainly, last 4 years really working a lot on trying to get 3.0 out there. But I will be having a 10-year anniversary sale, most likely 50% off in April, because I started this on April 1st, surprisingly, in 2011. So
I hope it's not going to come
great.
along as an April's Fool kind of thing,
yeah. Yeah, so that'll be a week period. So there's no hurry. You can try out that for a while, and I'm very specific. I'll say the dates if you look at my blog or Twitter or any of that stuff, or my subreddit. I'll announce the time range, so you don't have to just buy it. I mean, I encourage you to buy it right away, but you don't have to download it, purchase it, and then if you don't like it, then you don't have to ask for a refund. Just give it a try. If you like it, then you got some time to get it on sale.
Because I noticed that you are giving some free codes, redemption codes on subreddit, and I'm like, I already have a code, and I think that's when I reached out to you and see if you could come on for a little chat with us, so our listeners will get to know you and all of that. And so that's how I kind of revitalized, the GoneMad, and then I went and re-downloaded because I know I had it, but it's there in my library, and I haven't been playing music much. But then I'm like, oh gosh, GoneMad Music, I need to re-download that. And so that's what revitalized or reawakened me back to GoneMad Music, and then I got in touch with you.
Great. It sounded like my plan worked. That was why I did the giveaway, is to get, advertising's expensive, and I've paid for advertising on Reddit, and it's pretty much, I'm going to say useless. You have to spend a lot of money. So the best way to do it is really through sales and giveaways. And if you want people talking about it, so I really rely on word of mouth. And I feel like, I try to respond as best as I can to the users, and, not, I think a lot of developers just ignore, the feedback they get and stuff like that, but I always try to respond. So I hope that extra effort, people realize that, and they recommend it to their friends or family or whatever.
All right, guys. So if you are listening to this episode and you want to experience GoneMad Music, so Kyle would be giving you a free redemption code. So you're going to redeem the app. And if you write to us, of course, you have to write to us at contactus@blindandroidusers.com and mention the code. This is our code. It'll be BAU18, Boy Apple Uniform 18. Without mentioning that, we will not give you the redemption code. So the very few people are very first that respond, and once they're exhausted, they're exhausted. Sounds good, guys?
Sounds great.
All right.
I have one last question. The app is Music Player, but have you thought of adding support to chapter markers let's say like our podcast has chapter markers, there'll be other podcasts with chapter markers. So if someone downloads an MP3 file and opens it in the Music Player, can they navigate by chapters then? Because very few apps have this capability.
So that's a very good question. I don't have support for straight up chapter markers. The audio engine itself does, because if you're familiar with the a Q file, let's say you're downloading a dance mix or something like that of 20 some songs, a Q, it's going to be in a single MP3, let's say. The Q file kind of says similar to chapters. This is the start of of track 1, track 2, and stuff like that. The audio engine itself supports chapters. I just never expanded that for like audiobooks or podcasts or anything like that. And if you've in 3.0, I did make a specific podcast section. You have to add it to the the library. Same with audiobooks. So that is a good point. I will write that down as something to look into, because I assume the chapters are just stored somewhere in the tags of the file. If so, that should translate pretty well. So yeah, I can. I mean, if you want to reach out to me, we can discuss it further on how that would be. What's a good way to implement that? Because I don't use podcast players or anything like that, so I don't know how the chapters are typically handled.
So I know that Austin said that's the last question, but I do have another question. So people might be curious about what formats does the music player support? Like, does it support MP3, M4A? What else?
Sure, it supports everything that's popular and even less popular. I don't have the full list on me, but off of memory, you have MP3, M4A, all the different various extensions of that, OGG Vorbis, AAC, raw AAC, which is slightly different. Opus, which I know that's a more popular one. That's FLAC, yes, FLAC, and also ALAC. So Apple Lossless is supported. There's some other ones like TTA.
What about Wave?
Yes.
Okay.
Regular Wave, but the issue with Wave is there's really no tags associated with that. I believe a Wave file will play as long as it's PCM format. A Wave, you can have a few different ones. Like I've had some users contact me about they want to play their voicemails or something, and it's in a Wave extension, but it's not this PCM format, so that doesn't play. But if you're extracting straight from a CD, that's PCM, and that will work. I would strongly recommend encoding it to FLAC or ALAC or something like that if you want the lossless style. But the other ones I can think of, there's WavePack, which is different than Wave. There's Monkey's Audio, which is APE. If it's popular, if you've heard of it, very high chance that supports it. Most of the users are either M4A or MP3 and FLAC. Those are probably the three biggest ones.
Well, thank you so much, Kyle. So we again want to thank you for coming on, and hey, how about we do this again? Maybe say in a couple of months, 3 months, from now, give you feedback on what our people are saying about the music player, because we have a forum, at Blind Android Users. We have Blind Android users.com, and so we have a forum called Blind Android Users Forum, and so I would like to give you feedback as to what people are saying, and also if you could come back and let's talk a little bit some more down the line. And
sure.
Most especially after we give these free codes to people. I want to keep you abreast with what's going on.
Yeah, that sounds good. I always like hearing feedback.
During that interview with Kyle, you heard us talk about redemption codes, and we do have 10 redemption codes, which we will give you on a first come, first serve basis, which will enable you to get GoneMad Music Player for free. So the first 10 listeners who email us on contactus@blindandroidusers.com, mentioning the code we mention in the interview with Kyle, that's very important. You must mention the code we mentioned in the interview with Kyle in your email. The first 10 people to email us with that code will receive a redemption code, which will enable them to enjoy this fabulous app for free. It goes without saying that our decision is final, and it will be based on the time that your email is received in our inbox. So do take advantage of this. Email us with that code mentioned in the interview on contactus@blindandroidusers.com.